Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. The council meeting is now live, is my understanding from the notice of the clerks. And on that note, Madam Clerk, could you please affirm that quorum is present?
Mayor Horvath, quorum is present.
Thanks very much. Then I would like to call the meeting of City Council to order. Here in Council Chambers, we have Councillor Jackson, Councillor Wang, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Francis, Councillor Chattison, Councillor Spadafora, Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Clark, Councillor Kretsch, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Beattie, Councillor Danko, and joining us virtually is Councillor Nan. So welcome, everyone. I'd like to start off by asking people to stand, please, for the national anthem. Thank you. Please be seated. City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 by the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbours, partners, and caretakers. Members are reminded that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during council meetings. And we'll get started right away, please, with the approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mayor Horvath. There are 6 added communication items. Item 536, correspondence respecting changes to the Regulation 4124 from Lindsay Knight Pfeiffer, Deborah Boyd, Jean Jacobs, John McKillop, and Jean Wilson, with the recommendation to be received and referred to the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development for appropriate action. And item 537, correspondence from Robert Brosseau respecting HSR bus stops, no parking zones. The recommendation to be received and referred to the General Manager of Public Works for appropriate action. There is one motion being withdrawn. Item 7.8. Prefabrication leased washroom pilot at Woodlands Park in Ward 3 has been withdrawn.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. We are now then on the motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion on the agenda as amended? No. Seeing none then, we'll call for the vote. Oh, we need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, sorry, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. We'll go to the vote. Thank you. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much. Declarations of interest. Members of council, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Pauls?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I would like to disclose a disqualifying interest for Agenda Item 8.1. Reconsideration of the decision that was approved at the March 29, 2023 Council meeting respecting Item 6.11B, the Integrity Commissioner's report regarding a conflict of interest complaint against myself, Councillor Paul, stated March 23rd, 2023. Accordingly, I'll be abstaining. Thank you.
And that is a disqualifying interest?
Yes.
Thank you so much, then. I don't see any further declarations of interest. Oh, Councillor Danko, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On item 6.2 of the GIC committee report, item 5, the Housing Sustainability and Investment Roadmap, I have a non-disqualifying interest as the direction that was approved was to forward this to the HWDSB Liaison Committee. The non-disqualifying interest is that my wife is currently a serving HWDSB trustee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danko. Any further conflicts of interest disclosures? Seeing none, then, we'll go on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, as there are no ceremonial activities. So we will go to the first one, which is, actually, we can do them all at once. February 28th, March 4th, March 20th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 28th, 2024, March 4th, 2024, and March 20, 2024 meetings as presented? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor Wang. Any discussion on the minutes, folks? Seeing none, we'll put the vote up, please, then. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much. We're now on to communications. Councillor Kretsch, may I have the motion on the communications items, please?
Sure thing. Moved by myself and seconded by incoming Deputy Mayor Maureen Wilson that communication items 5.1 to 5.37 be approved in the list as follows. And I won't read the list. We all have it.
Thanks very much. That's been moved then and seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Any discussion on the communication items, folks? Oh, sorry. Councillor Wilson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. We have a number of pieces of communication alluding to this. I'll just choose one, 5.19, for example, by Dr. Peter Banting, from Dr. Peter Banting. It speaks to the changes to conservation authority in Ontario, all conservation authorities. It was a regulation that was brought in, no surprise, the Friday Family Day weekend. And I just would like to highlight 3 parts of the regulation that I think should cause us all great distress and alarm. The regulations were brought in under the pretense of we needed a more enabling environment to build more homes. And as of yesterday's budget discussion, there was at least a public reconciliation that the Government of Ontario is not going to be able to hit the target of 1.5 million homes in the stated timeline. But the narrative goes something like this. Municipalities are to blame because your decision-making permit system is too slow and it's causing a backlog. And overly aggressive and onerous environmental regulations are to blame because they are restricting our ability to build homes. Both of those things, those narratives are untrue. I will focus on one of them, and it comes through these regulations that were introduced, as I mentioned, the Friday before a long weekend. The points that should be of concern are changes that were made on 3 fronts. The first was a complete removal of the definition and the word pollution in that which conservation authorities should have regard to when they do their commenting on development permits. Apparently, we're not concerned as Ontarians about pollution and in making its way into our urban creeks and our waterways. The second one was a definition of what conservation authorities could consider as a wetland, and it went from, for provincially significant wetlands, from 120 meters down to 30. So all wetlands, conservation authorities are only able to comment on development that comes up to 30 meters to a wetland. And the third was a redefinition of what constitutes a creek or a waterway, much more restrictive. These are a concern to us because we absolutely fundamentally know that the integrity of our groundwater system, the integrity of our creeks, the integrity of our marshes, such as Cootes Paradise, is integral to our future health, our future well-being, and this is an effort in which to further discount the value of our natural environment for some. We all know who those some are, who have been likely blaming overly aggressive environmental regulations when those regulations are there to protect us. If you do not care about the natural environment, you surely care about water in your basement, about flooding that comes when we have too much asphalt, when we build in floodplains, when we build monster homes and any other home in the wrong place. This benefits developers, it does not benefit Ontarians, it does not benefit our children, and it will never benefit our economy, and it won't allow us to build more homes. Thank you, Mayor Horvath.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We have a speakers list. Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On two correspondence items, if I could, the first one being 5.6. The correspondence references City Housing Hamilton vacant units, and I just wanted to correct the record as this this correspondence is going to be received today on the council and is on the public agenda. So from that perspective, I did want to report back that as of February this year, the total number of CHH vacant units was sitting at 512, of which 173 were already renovated and on offer and to be occupied and moved into by new tenants at CHH or transfers within CHH. 260 of those 512 have active work orders, and the balance of 179 units are currently under inspection or queued up for work orders. And they were either at that inspection stage or work was pending. And we will be able to provide another update once we are able to update all of our data, but there should be a report at the next City Housing Hamilton board meeting as well. So I just wanted to correct the public record on that one. And if I could, through you, Mayor, just briefly on item 5.35, FCM's correspondence back to council from the March FCM board meetings that took place in Prince George, British Columbia. I just wanted to reaffirm that our resolution that we passed unanimously by council to seek support for immediate federal government investment to top up what is required to make municipalities whole for supporting asylum seekers as well as refugees, specifically in the shelter system and around their housing benefit, was voted in concurrence by the FCM board, which makes it official FCM policy, and the FCM will be pursuing this issue with the City of Hamilton as well as other municipalities who sponsored and supported the resolution, and will be sending correspondences to the relevant federal ministers outlining the call for action as a national call from municipalities across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nan, and great work. Thanks. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I just wanted to pick up where my colleague, Councillor Maureen Wilson, left off with respect to the regulation changes item, I believe, the correspondence items being 5.36. The letters that we've received from residents, just want to thank residents for taking the time to engage in this issue, for continuing to raise their voices in defense of our watersheds. The action being taken today is referral to the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development for appropriate action. Just wanted to let folks know that at the Hamilton Conservation Authority, our board's looking at what options are available, and I think there'll be a similar request to GM Robichaud in advance of our next planning committee to, again, talk about what information can we provide to the public. These are provincial decisions. They happen at Queen's Park. They don't happen here as much as we think they should. They happen at Queen's Park. That said, with the urban boundary issue and with other issues, Hamilton has been able to lead the way in informing our community about what these changes are, walking these changes with our neighbors. And I think many of us are looking to do a similar approach. And so just want to thank our community's engagement, because that's been persistent across all of these changes and all of these issues. While we may not be satisfied with the decisions happening at Queen's Park, I'm incredibly satisfied and incredibly grateful for the relentless capacity of our residents to keep raising their voices to build a Hamilton and a watershed that's healthy and works for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. Similarly to Councillors Wilson and Wilson. 5.19, the correspondence from Dr. Peter Banning. If I could ask perhaps to Mr. Robichaud, our acting GM of Planning and Economic Development, if there will be a report coming to council indicating what the changes from the provincial government means to the city of Hamilton, and with respect to the new obligations that the city of Hamilton has picked up, where the conservation authorities used to provide those services, now the city of Hamilton is required, just so the public know that something's coming, we just don't have it yet.
Absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Clark. Acting General Manager Robichaud, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes. Staff are currently in the process of preparing a communications update based on the changes to the Ontario regulations, in order to make sure that everyone is aware of what the changes mean. We did have a meeting earlier this week with the 4 conservation authorities to discuss these changes. We just wanted to make sure that staff were correct in their understanding of these changes, and that will be that information will be included in the information or the communications update. I would like to point out, though, these regulatory changes do not affect the current City of Hamilton in force and affect official plan policies and zoning regulations. So although the conservation authorities will not be able to comment on a development proposal if it's 35 meters away from a wetland, our official plan still has policies requiring that it be assessed based on those 120 meters setback difference from a wetland. We are looking at a gap analysis between the old regulations and the new regulations to try to better understand what that means if there be areas that won't be protected as a result of these regulatory changes. And all of that information will inform that communications update that we hope to have out to council within the next 2 to 3 working days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you for that, Mayor, and thank you, Steve, for that report. And I look forward to getting that report. I'm pleased that Steve mentioned that the 4 conservation areas that share the watersheds for the city of Hamilton have met with Steve to break down roles, responsibilities, and obligations. So we will continue to do what we can in that regard in terms of protecting these wetlands. For folks who may not see this as a big deal, and Mayor, there are people out there that don't see this as a big deal. They just think, oh, okay, so what? Beverly Marsh. I would challenge folks to go out to see the Beverly Marsh during a torrential downpour. And if you go to the top of the Beverly Marsh and you see all the water that's going into that marsh, and then you go to the bottom of that marsh and see how little water is flowing out of it. It's not magically evaporating, it's being absorbed by the wetland. That's what wetlands and marshes do for us. They actually help protect us from flooding downstream. So and I look to my colleague to the right, Councillor Alex Wilson and Councillor Kassar, they have the largest number of provincially significant wetlands in their wards. Those wetlands serve a purpose. That's why the 120-meter setback was there for so long. And to remove it summarily without understanding the impact of what those developments would have on that wetland is, how would I word this diplomatically? Short-sighted. And I'm pleased to see that our staff will be looking at it from the standpoint of environmental impact assessments to make sure that any development that is encroaching on those former setbacks are doing so in a wise and from the mindset of protecting that particular feature. So I look forward to our staff reporting back on it. Our Conservation Authority will continue to do what we can to protect our watershed. But it is deeply troubling that when we were consulted and the Conservation Authority staff and board provided their comments back to the government, I'm not sure what happened to those comments because they really were not considered. If they were, these changes would not have been made. So I just wanted to put that on the public record. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Kassar, please.
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. Regarding item 5.9 from a letter from Enbridge, I had some questions for Director Lukasik, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
So the letter is a response to the motion I put forward at Council in February and was unanimously supported by this Council regarding the OEB decision to cease a subsidy for installation of new gas pipelines for residential and small commercial. And Enbridge has responded to that. So I just thought it would be helpful to have Director Lukasik's input on this. First of all, I think there's a number of things happening with natural gas in Hamilton, the Hamilton Reinforcement Project with AMD versus what's being referenced in the OEB recommendation, which is now subsequently being overturned by the province. If Director Lukasik could just speak to the differences there, because natural gas is being put forward as part of the solution to reduce emissions, which is not that straightforward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kassar. Director Lukasik, please go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Horvath. Thanks for that question, Councillor Kassar. It's an important one. So yes, in the letter, reference is made to the Hamilton Reinforcement Project and the transition that ArcelorMittal Dofasco is making towards lower carbon, ultimately no carbon fuel in the future. So it's a little bit of it's like comparing apples and oranges, I would argue. In that project, we certainly do have a very large industrial facility, the largest point source of greenhouse gas emissions in the province, shifting away from coal power. I think in the case of the revenue horizon issue and residential connections, we're talking about new residential facilities and decisions being made at the point of a construction about what sort of energy supply to bring to those new residential properties. So it's a little bit different. It's about making the right decisions now in providing that option for choice in the here and now as new homes are being constructed, ideally, encouraging that shift towards lower carbon choices. Mm-hmm. So that would be the difference that I would highlight there.
Thank you. Councillor Kassar?
Yeah, thank you. And to build on that, we're talking about those new home installations, small commercial installations. And a big part of the OEB decision was about stranded assets, which you're sort of alluding to, that we're in an energy transition. So maybe if you're possible, could you just elaborate on that through the mayor?
Go ahead, please.
Certainly,
Director.
through you, Mayor Horvath. I've been learning lots about revenue horizons and stranded assets. So yes, the shift is away from a 40-year revenue horizon over which a property owner would pay back the cost for the connection to the OEB's proposal to make that a 0-year horizon. And part of the concern that's being raised there is that we need to make this shift because we are seeing that larger energy shift. It's happening already. We're encouraging it as a municipality. We have a project through the Office of Climate Change Initiatives to promote that transition to air source heat pumps as an example. So we know that the change is happening and we'll see more of it over time. And the OEB has raised raised that concern that the more you invest in that natural gas, that methane gas infrastructure, as your customer base dwindles, there is that risk there around stranded assets and fewer people being responsible for carrying those costs moving forward.
Thank you, makes sense. And just final question then, just confirming if Director Lukaszuk wants to comment, is the OEB is an independent agency to regulate the industry, electricity and natural gas, and is looking out for Ontarians in the best interest of Ontarians. And I think that's what's being done here. That's what was in the motion. If the director would just like to comment on that, contrasting versus what's best for Enbridge versus what's best for Ontarians.
Director, please go ahead.
Through the chair, yes. They have a mission and a mandate to do exactly that. There are independent decision maker when it comes to energy in the province. So they do play a very important role in balancing out interests, and not just environmental climate interests, but economic and social interests as well, for the greater good, for the good of all Ontarians, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a concluding comment, very happy that Council supported the motion that brought forward back in February, and I continue to stand by that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cassar. I don't see any further speakers on the speakers list. So the correspondence is, Councillor McMeekin, please.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Some general comments. I keep seeing, particularly when we deal with the number of pieces of correspondence, a whole bunch of connections around the erosion of what was and continues to be seen as one of the single most important achievements of the previous government around the Greenbelt. Around the erosion of authorities for conservation, authorities, tax on heritage lands, now wetlands, and the reference to the Beverly Swamp is an interesting one, because we learned a long time ago, if it weren't for the Beverly Swamp, Councillor Wilson's ward would be flooded every year, deeply flooded. So, the appreciation for the natural treatment of water is absolutely important. I want to draw a connection between what has been said about 519 and the issue 530 from the township of Amaranth on Highway 413. I'm disappointed that to learn recently that the feds have jettisoned their insistence that a special environmental assessment occur before anything be done there. The township of Amaranth, which is in that area, has suggested, I think rather cleverly, that wouldn't it be a much better investment to take that $8 billion that's anticipated and use that to shore up shortcomings on municipal infrastructure and the like. And I hope that at some point when we're going to receive that, I hope we can actually find a way to make some positive comment with respect to that as we continue to register our concern with the foolish and consistent attacks on environmental heritage. A great letter to the editor today. I want to note this because I thought it was a great quote about fighting climate change. And the author ended, "We all need to fight climate change or die frying." And I thought that was so true around the temperature going up and the hottest year in history. Our oceans are in trouble. Anyhow, enough said. It's clear that there's some misguided policies here that we could probably, on a good day, help correct. And I just want to put that on the record with thanks to my colleagues, and in particular, thank conservation authorities and its leadership.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin. I don't see any further speakers on the list then. So the correspondence is in front of us, moved by Councillor Crutch and seconded by Councillor Wilson. So could we please have a vote on that? That carries 16 to 0. Thanks all very much. Before I ask for the Committee of the Whole motion, can I just ask for your indulgence for one moment? I was rushing in here and trying to deal with my chair and all the other things, and my computer wouldn't work, so I missed the opportunity to make an opening remark, and so I would ask your indulgence to just allow me to do that, because we're in the holy month of Ramadan, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that. So as many of you know, at sundown on March 10th, the Muslim community commenced the very special month of Ramadan. This holy month is a time of reflection, fasting, increased charity, and spiritual growth. I wish, and I hope on behalf of all of us, wish a heartfelt, in fact, I'm certain on behalf of all of us, wish a heartfelt Ramadan Mubarak to the Muslim community in Hamilton, and look forward to seeing folks from the 16 mosques across our city at my iftar taking place next week. And of course, you're all welcome to join us for that. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your indulgence. So with that, then, can we please go into the Committee of the Whole? And Councillor Kretsch, may I have a motion to move into the Committee of the Whole, please?
With glee, and my seconder again, I hope, Councillor Maureen Wilson, the future Deputy Mayor, that we get right to the Committee of the Whole.
Thanks very much. Can we have a vote on that? That carries 16 to 0. So we're on to the committee reports. 6.1 Public Works Committee Report 24-003, February 2024. Councillor Alex Wilson, may I please have the motion to receive and approve the recommendations within the Public Works Committee report? And I believe that there is an amendment to one of the items coming from Councillor Maureen Wilson, and so we'll get the motion and then go to the amendment. Please go ahead.
I don't know if it's the same amendment, but I also have one, so you may have the wrong Wilson down, or there may be two amendments, but we'll start by getting it on the floor. And I'll say that it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Spadafora, our chair of the committee, that Public Works Report 2403, being the meeting held on Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thanks very much. So now, in terms of the amendments, I do have notice in my roadmap for Councillor Wilson's amendment. So if you don't mind, Councillor Maureen Wilson first, and then if it doesn't cover off your amendment, Councillor Alex Wilson, then we'll turn to you. So Councillor Maureen Wilson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. Mine pertains to item 2. Main Street two-way conversion. It is with respect to D, the language in and around D. I'll let everybody toggle to there. It's just a little bit of a rewording in terms of scope. The detailed design work, review and incorporate additional features that prioritize non-vehicular use of the southernmost eastbound lane between Dundurn and Summers Lane, including a dedicated bus lane, on-street parking, pedestrian zone improvements, and other complete street enhancements that are achievable within the existing curb-to-curb width and respecting the established project budget envelope and accelerated project delivery schedule. And it's seconded by Councillor Kretsch.
Okay, thanks very much. So we have Councillor Wilson?
On ECS, apologies getting committees mixed up.
Oh, okay. All right. So we do have an amendment on the floor. Thank you so much for putting it on the screen for us. Any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I ask through you to staff if they've had a chance to review the amendment, and what does it do to the layout that was proposed in terms of the detailed design work?
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I believe that would be over to GM Can.
Yep, through the Chair, General Manager Carlisle Kent. Through the wording of the motion, I don't think there's a significant impact. This is how we would approach it. Director Kennedy is in the field there, and she will add to my response.
Thanks very much. If you don't mind, Councillor Clark, we'll go up to Director Kennedy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Jackie Kennedy, Director of Engineering Services. We have had a chance to review the motion. The wording is a clarification on the direction that we would be undertaking during the design process, so it does not significantly impact the work ahead of us, and we will communicate clarity on what the specifics of the design come from as we move forward with the work ahead of us.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated. Councillor Clark?
Thank you. So I no longer have questions on that, but on the main motion when it's appropriate.
Okay,
please.
perfect. Absolutely. Any further questions on the amendment? Is there any then further discussion on the report? We'll go through all the discussion and take the amendment and then the final vote. Is that all right with folks in terms of process? Okay, perfect. Any further discussion on the report? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, and I don't sit on Public Works, so forgive me for my questions. So the $26 million cost, which was a sticker shock for many people in the city, can I ask, a lot of the traffic concerns that we were going to have, which perhaps initiated some of the talk about two-waying Main Street, will there be an opportunity for the city to seek any additional reimbursement from Metrolinx as we have to do this in order to make way for the train and the traffic rerouting that may occur?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I believe that would be GM Can as well.
Yep, through the chair to the councillor, without a doubt, we are working with Metrolinx with regards to ensuring that there aren't any conflictions during construction. We continue to work with them. We're trying to nail down the schedule. I know Director Ryle may have some additional comments to add to it. We are planning to get this work done as best as we can in advance of the Metrolinx work. And in addition, if we had to move very quickly and then pause so that we don't have intersections within the same block being done, we would do that, and we would work somewhere along the 14-kilometer stretch of road.
Director Ryle, please go ahead.
Through the chair, good afternoon. Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation Services. So I am concurring with what GM Con just relayed. Staff are working extremely closely with the LRT team and Metrolinx to understand, obviously, our work plans as they unfold with regards to how there could be coordination and intercepts that may be happening with regards to our works and theirs. And to your point, Councillor, if there are any safety concerns or any other matters we need to be raising, those conversations will be had, and they continue to be ongoing around many different factors.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clark.
I thank them for that response, Mayor. My question was in terms of costs, offsetting costs. So legitimately, there are going to be a diversion of traffic, not just through construction, but afterwards. And so if the diversion of traffic is one of the primary reasons that we are considering the two-laning of Main Street, then one would think that there would be some compensation from Metrolinx with regards to that, because we're taking all that traffic and pushing it onto Main Street, which makes it much easier for Metrolinx and for the LRT. So I'm asking whether or not there is any
Monetary compensation coming from the province.
Thank you. You said it much quicker than me.
No, you said it perfectly. I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure if there's anybody here at this point that can answer that question. But what I would suggest then is if it's something that you're wanting to pursue, then perhaps we should give direction for the pursuit of compensation for that.
Okay.
But I'll go to GN Can, who indicated that he had something to add.
Yep, through the chair to the councillor, without a doubt, we will look at that. I think part of the Metrolinx LRT goal is to get people out of vehicles and into mass transit. So the shifting of traffic hopefully is moving people from one form of transportation to another, and we won't see that happening. But definitely if this is the direction of this council and we want us to explore those discussions, we will do that by all means. I think that will naturally happen anyhow.
Yeah, Mayor, I recall all too well the reports that indicated 68% of the traffic would be rerouted onto Main and onto Aberdeen, which is going to be a challenge for the Ward 1 councillor, but we know for a fact there will be traffic rerouting. Not everyone will take LRT. So I will add, if I may, some kind of motion to amend that to make that inquiry anyways, and it doesn't have to be amendment here. We can do it separately later on. Can I ask, secondly, an understanding on the phasing in of the $26.5 million? So is that going to be a $26.5 million hit to one capital budget year? Or is that going to be a capital cost spread over 2 or 3 years?
Thank you. Jim Zagarek, please.
Yeah. Through you, Madam Mayor. Mike Zagarek, General Manager, Finance Corporate Services. Finance will work with Public Works to understand the scope of the work, and the importance of the scope of the work will determine the financing strategy. If some of those investments are towards assets that have a long life, we would consider bringing forward some debt financing as an option, and that debt financing may have a 15-year term. If some of the investments have a shorter lifespan, then those would likely be funded through in-year capital contributions. So again, it'll be subject to a better understanding as it relates to the investments and the life of the assets, and we'll match the life of the assets with our financing strategy.
So if I can rephrase, and I apologize, I'm going over my 5 minutes, Mayor. That $26.5 million I'm rounding up may well be financed through debt, and that would be spread over a longer period of time so that we don't have a $26 million hit next year to our budget.
Through the chair, that's correct. And that's consistent with our traditional financing strategy. If an asset has a lifespan benefiting multiple generations, we look to fund that over an expanded time period. And again, it'll be subject to a better understanding of the investments and the assets.
Thank you for that. And Mayor, I think what I'd like to do, as opposed to doing an amendment on the fly, is work with your office and create a motion where we would make some inroads to the province to say, hey, let's be reasonable about this. Can you provide us some capital funds from that project to assist us with this change, rather than doing it on the fly here?
I appreciate that very much and look forward to that conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kassar is next, please.
Thanks, Mayor Horvath. I have an amending motion for item 8, if I may. It's a detailed drainage assessment study, Verley.
Mayor Horvath, we have to vote on Councillor Wilson's amendment
first before we go
item
back to others?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So then let's do that and stay on track here. So then there's no further discussion on Councillor Wilson's amendment. So that is then before us. Please identify your votes. Thank you. That carries 16-0. Now we're on to Councillor Kassar. Councillor Kassar has an amendment to item 8 of the Public Works Committee report respecting detailed drainage assessment study phase 2 of early service existing residential neighborhoods in Ancaster with a big long name. So please go ahead.
My apologies for my over-enthusiasm. It's moved by me, seconded by Chair of Public Works, Councillor Spadafora. This was distributed by Director Winters to all of Council. I'll just summarize the whereases and go to the resolutions. It's respecting a February 20th meeting of 2024. There was approvals except for item C on there about deferring lot severances for all rural cross areas with rural cross sections in Ancaster until phase 3 of a study was done. Staff have since considered committee's input and have then produced this amending motion. Okay, and it has to do with enhanced interim conditions citywide for any lot severances prior to this phase 3 study being done. So I'll leave the whereases at that and go to the resolution.
It's up on the screen.
Yeah, it's on the screen there. So the resolution is that item 8, respecting detailed drainage assessment study that I mentioned, be deleted. Item F under 8 be deleted, and that further it be amended with the bold portions, C, D, and E, that planning and economic development staff be directed to resume consideration and potential recommendation of approval for lot severance applications in the rurally serviced existing residential neighborhoods of Ancaster as identified in report PW 16100A and PED 24032. D, that planning and economic development staff be directed to recommend to the Committee of Adjustment that it implement in any decisions approving applicable consent applications the citywide enhanced interim conditions identified in this report for lot severances approvals in areas that do not have dedicated storm sewers within the urban boundary and rural settlement areas to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Engineering on an interim basis until the Phase 3 study identified previously is complete and implemented. And finally, that E, that planning and economic development staff be directed to file an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal for any Committee of Adjustment approval that departs from the requirements of the enhanced conditions referenced in recommendation D.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Cassar. Did you want to speak further to it?
No, I think that's pretty straightforward, and Council has already been able to see it.
Okay, excellent. Are there any speakers to this amendment then? I don't see any. So then we should probably dispose of the amendment. So we'll put the vote up. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much, folks. Are there any further speakers to this report? Any further speakers to the report? Seeing none then, we'll go to the report as initially moved and seconded. All those in, well, up goes the vote, I guess, is the better way to do this, the normal way. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much, all. We're now on to item 6.2, General Issues Committee Report 24-004, February 21st, 2024, with the exception of item 9, which was dealt with at Council on February 28th. So, Councillor McMeekin, may I please have the motion to receive and approve the recommendations within the General Issues Committee Report?
Yes, indeed, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wang, that the General Issues Committee Report 24004, being the meeting held on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024, be received, and the recommendations contained therein, with the exception of item 9, be approved.
Thanks very much. Again, who's your seconder? I'm sorry, Councillor McMeekin. Councillor Wang, thanks very much. Yep. So the report's on the floor. I see a speaker's list on the report, but we also have a motion from Councillor Cassar, which is in my roadmap. So we'll go for the amendment first and then go to the speaker's list. Is that appropriate for folks? Okay, great. So Councillor Cassar, can you please present your motion? It's to lift item 6G2, respecting subsections D and E of the Housing Sustainability and Investment Roadmap Work Program, City Property Review and Property Disposition Strategies from the information section of the GIC report, and add it as item 12 of the GIC report. Councillor Cassar, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Whereas at the February 21st, 2024 GIC meeting, the recommendations D and E, as mentioned, of the HSIR work program and so on, were defeated in a tie vote of 8-8. Whereas honoring, yeah, this is the lifting motion. Yeah.
This is a lifting motion. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the lifting motion. Whereas honoring veterans has been raised as a priority to some members of the local community, and housing development on the site provides additional opportunities to enhance how veterans are honored. Whereas both the Stony Creek Business Improvement Area and some members of the broader community have expressed concerns about the removal of 57 parking spots from the municipal parking lots at 5 and 13 Lake Avenue South. Whereas some members of the local community have expressed the need to ensure convenient parking for individuals with mobility challenges when accessing local physiotherapy medical services. Whereas there are opportunities to increase on-street and off-street public parking in areas adjacent to the subject sites, and whereas there are potential opportunities to lease private parking lots to add additional public parking capacity within the BIA. So therefore, be it resolved that this section mentioned be lifted and added as item 12 of the General Issues Committee Report 24-004. And if I could speak to it briefly?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor, 9 days ago, I shared a draft of these amendments with all of Council asking for feedback and input because we had dealt with this at GIC and had some time because of the cybersecurity incident in order to deal with it prior to coming back to Council. So I shared those amendments addressing, as I mentioned, the concerns about parking and honoring our veterans. Those are topics that we heard over and over again in delegations and in letters of correspondence on the agenda. There was lots of time for all to provide input, and I asked again over this past weekend. I didn't get any recommendations for changes.
Can I just hold off for 1 minute? The amendments that you're speaking to are not on the floor.
Okay.
What's on the floor is the amending motion, or the lifting motion. And so the discussion really should be restricted to the lifting motion.
Right.
And then should it be successfully lifted, then the conversation around the actual amendments themselves can be duly debated around the table. So that's the advice that I've had from the clerks, and it's procedurally the correct thing to do. So I then would ask for, if you wanted to speak to the lifting motion itself and why it's here, and then any other comments around the lifting motion, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Horvath, and apologies. Yeah, so I wanted to lift this in order to deliberate on the amendments because they directly address issues that we had heard from community members. And there is a solution here. There's been lots of talk, of course, in the media. I think there's a compromise here in order to build housing as well as retain or address the concerns from the community.
Thank you so much. So that in order to do that work, you're asking for the motion to be, or for the item to be lifted from the report and debated later on at the end of this the rest of the discussion on the report. Councillor Nan, please. And again, let's all keep our comments to the actual lifting motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just appreciating the motion to lift this item and put it on the council agenda as item 12 in the GIC report. I think it is proper procedure. We do it often when there are matters that are discussed within a standing committee that have been voted in one way, and as council and as the right of all council members, we can lift those items and bring them back for further deliberation. So really appreciating the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nan. Are there any other comments, any other further discussion on the lifting motion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote then. This is on lifting the item and bringing it to the end of this discussion on this report as item 12. So that motion is defeated on an 8-8 tied vote. Thank you for your efforts, Councillor Cassar. And we are now then on to any other items on the report that people would like to discuss. Oh, right, Councillor Clark, you were on my list. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 7, I just wish to be recorded as opposed to it. I voted against it at committee, and I'd like to vote against it now. Item number 7, that's 2024 temporary outdoor patio program fees. Not sure if you have to sever it or if I can just be indicated as voting no.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Horvath, we will have to have a separate vote on item 7 in this case.
Okay. All right, so then I'll see if there are any other speakers, and then we'll be reminding me to pull item 7 out for a separate vote so that Councillor Clark can be recorded. Okay, Councillor Danko, please.
Just asking.
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute? Whoever's got a phone that's ringing, can you please take care of it so that it's not distracting the council meeting? Thanks very much. Much appreciated. Go ahead, Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mayor. Just asking for a separate vote on item 11. This is, hang on a second, direction that was provided in camera regarding a legal update under the Endangered Species Act. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Don't see any further speakers on the list. Oh, Councillor Wang, please.
Mayor, is there an opportunity to pull out and have a separate vote on item item 9, please? That is the acquisition of land, no, sorry, that's the wrong one, I'm really sorry. About the existing, the one that we just had defeated. I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
No, that procedurally has already been dealt with.
Oh, I didn't know if there was a way to pull out and separately vote on it, because as the report as a whole, didn't we?
I don't believe so. I think the vote is recorded already as defeated, so it's actually not on our.
Got it. Okay.
On the actual agenda as a separate item. My understanding is. Clerk Pilon?
Mayor Horvath, you are correct. It's in the information section as a defeated motion, which doesn't require a decision by council today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for
Councillor
that
Wang.
clarification.
I appreciate that. So I don't see any further. Oh, Councillor Kretsch, please.
Thanks, and I really appreciate that guidance from the clerk, and I want to just, if I could, put a fine point on this and ask a question about it. I think it's really important for the consumption of the public record that we understand exactly what you mean by what you've said. So my understanding has always been, and I'll ask the question, I'm just going to brief preamble, that my understanding has always been that the goal of council meetings after we have a general issues committee or public works committee or whatever committee we have is to ratify the vote. So we're making a decision here as a council to ratify the defeated vote. In fact, General Issues Committee can't make that decision without our ratification. It's nice that the committee did that, right? But we get to ratify the vote. It seems to me, I understand what you've said, but I'm saying, I want to say for the record, it seems procedurally odd to me that our decision-making ability as council would be somehow truncated when something is defeated, that we wouldn't be able to ratify that vote or affirm our vote when something has been defeated, whereas it's been approved. So I'm saying that for the public record because procedurally, and as our role as council, seems to be that we can't touch those items that have been defeated, or we can't have weigh in on them, although those decisions will be ratified by council. So the only other thing we could do then is vote against the whole report, which would seem to be problematic. So.
Thanks, Councillor Kretsch. Is there anything that is kind of needing to be clarified from the clerk's perspective in terms of the procedural matter that Councillor Kretsch was raising?
The information section of the GIC report is to be received, not approved. The actions within the GIC report are what council is approving today and just receiving the information section. If council wanted to re-vote on that item, the manner to go about that is to lift it and add it as an item, and that motion was defeated. So council is not, by their vote, by the result of their vote, not in favor of doing that today.
Great, and so I'm going to belabor it slightly. So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying, and I want to make sure we have this clear, what you're saying is that because of the place something is in a report, because it's in the information section of the report, when we put the defeated motions in the information section of the report, that doesn't allow the same courtesy we have with other motions to be able to just say, hey, we want to have a separate vote on this item. But I want to clarify, we're making a decision today regardless about that, even though it's in the information section, right? A decision is still being made at council today.
Yeah, basically the decision was that the item that had already been voted on and was defeated, this body has decided not to re-examine that item. And so the initial decision stands because there's no other opportunity to have that conversation because it's not been lifted into the report that's in front of us. Absolutely.
I think the answer I'm looking for confirmation of is specifically because it's in the information section of the report.
Yes, the information section is received for information, and this matter was not approved by committee.
Yep, I understand that second part, just that it's in the information report section and that's the issue. Cool, I just wanted to make that distinguishment really clear for everybody that semantic reality of if things are in the information report and have to be lifted out versus if things aren't. It's our procedural bylaw, we all have to follow it. I'm just stating my concerns about that, thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kretsch. And just again for clarity, is this different than any other situation that we've addressed or that previous councils have addressed in terms of the process for lifting items that are in an information section of a report? If you can, Clerk.
This is the process that council follows when lifting an item from an information section and voting on it as an action item in the report. And in this case, council's not in favor of doing that today.
As a result of the tie vote, which defeats it. Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Kretsch. Appreciate it. I don't see any other speakers to the report, so can we go to item 7, which Councillor Clark had asked to be pulled separately, and have the vote on item 7, please? And that carries 15-1. Thanks very much. We are now on to item 11, please, which we're having a separate vote on. I believe Councillor Danko requested that one. And that carries 15-1. Thanks very much. Now we're on to the balance of the report as a whole that was moved by Councillor McMeekin and seconded by Councillor Wang. We go to the vote on the report as a whole. That carries 15-1. Thanks very much. We're now on to item 6.3, which is the Audit, Finance and Administration Committee Report 24-004, February 22nd, 2024. Councillor Wang, may I please have a motion to receive and approve the recommendations within the Audit, Finance and Administration Committee report? Councillor Wang also has an amendment, so we'll start with the motion.
Yes, Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Vice Chair Spatafora, that the Audit, Finance, Administration Committee Report 24-004, being the meeting held on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thanks very much. Then we'll go to your amendment first and have further discussion on the report following that.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Spatafora as well, that item 3 of the Audit, Finance, Administration Committee report be amended as follows. We heard, item 3 is 2024 Development Charges Background Study and Bylaw Update, Open House Feedback. And as you'll see on the screen there, that it's looking at an additional item B, that staff being directed to include an analysis of the possibility of exempting city development charges for nonprofit daycare centers operating under the Child Care and Early Years Act. 2, an analysis of the possibility of exempting city development charges for nonprofit long-term care facilities and fixing Long-Term Care Act. And 3, the analysis of a city development charge that would be applicable to buildings constructed on municipal-owned lands and operated or managed by Tradeport International Corporation under the terms of the airport lease between the city and Tradeport within the Airport Employment Growth District compared to similar airports such as Kitchener and Waterloo. C, that staff be directed to include in the in the report in April, an analysis for the possibility of the following scenarios for the first year of the development charges bylaw prior to moving to staff recommended rate and policy changes. 1, maintaining the city development charges adjusted for indexing along with 40% exemption for residential development downtown community project area, the 37% exemption for all industrial development, and maintaining the 50% expansion exemption for detached industrial expansions. 2, updating the city development charges, but maintaining the current 40% exemption for residential development, 37% industrial, maintaining the 50% exemption. 3, the financial impact to the tax levy in the first year, as well as long-term financial economic uplift, should either of these scenarios be adopted by council. Mayor, may I speak to this?
Absolutely, please do go ahead.
Thank you. At the AFA meeting, we did hear from many delegations as well as written correspondences for us to go back and look at several different scenarios, of which we've tried to incorporate them in this amendment. But I think that where I'd like to really delve into is asking staff to come back with different scenarios for us, because we have heard from the community that they're asking for sometimes the status quo, sometimes a compromise, or any way for us to be innovative in which we can deliver on these development charges. As we all know, development charges are a significant revenue generator for the City of Hamilton, and I am thankful that our development community understands that this is a very important revenue line item for us. But this is also where we also have to listen to the community and see how can we best find a balance between it all. So this is the challenge, and this is where I'm asking for council to consider this amending motion so we can get additional information prior to making a very significant development charges decision by April. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wang. We have a speakers list started, so we are on to Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the motion from Councillor Wang. I'd like to ask, I think it would be GM Zagaric, a question, if I may, on the process. So we've now had our public meeting on development charges, which is a requirement under the Development Charges Act. We will get a report back based on this amendment. I'm assuming to AFNA or to the Development Charges Subcommittee, which would it be to? I think it's still in the ownership of AFNA, but I'm not sure.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Jim Zagaric, please.
Yeah. Through you, Madam Mayor. With respect to the development charge process, there have been 2 open houses in January of this year, followed with the public meeting in February, which included a number of delegations. With respect to this motion, it would come back to Audit, Finance and Administration. Councillor Clark is correct. And it would be through the deliberations at Audit, Finance and Administration that committee would consider the options highlighted in the motion, as well as the broader development charge background study and the associated bylaw.
Thank you for that. And that rings a bell now. Thank you. May I inquire then, is the AFNA committee required under the Development Charges Act to hold another public meeting if they make amendments to the proposed development charges bylaw?
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Jim Zagaric.
Through the chair, I'd like to take that back. My initial thought would be no, but I'd like to confirm that with legal services and our external experts and just provide a more wholesome, accurate response back.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to support the motion. We would like to have that information, but I think it's important for us to understand how we're going to, because we have to have this done by June 1.
Through the chair, that is the challenge that we are facing in order to have the authority to collect development charges is we need to have council approve a development charge bylaw. And that is the timeline we are working towards. It's the June 1st, hence the reference in the motion to report back to Audit Finance Administration in April to allow this to go to council in May in order to have a June 1st effective date.
Councillor Clark?
And the last question, if I may, is if there is any delay in that, has there been ever, I'm rewording that wrong, pardon me. If there is a delay and we don't hit the June 1 target, what's the ramifications to the municipality? Can they extend, and that means the development charges from the previous year are in play for another 30 days or whatever that extension is? Is that how it would work? Ultimately, a loss in revenue.
Jim Garrick?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's the latter that Councillor Clark's referred to is without a bylaw, we could not collect development charges, hence the need to have a bylaw in place in order for the city to collect this significant source of revenue to the municipality in the form of development charges.
Thank you. I look forward to the report from Mr. Scanlon and our legal staff. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Councillor Danko, please.
I'm really confused. Was this direction circulated in any way to council before I just saw it on the screen for 5 seconds?
I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Danko. Perhaps the mover and seconder could enlighten.
This was from our February AFA meeting, and I could have sworn it was directed to council, but I don't quite recall, so I'm trying to go through my emails, but I'm forwarding it out right now, and I'm really sorry, but I could have sworn that this was sent out way back in February, but.
There was no email, no heads up that this was coming at all. It's not on the agenda. It's a very significant decision of where we go with development charges. One of the most important revenue sources that we have as a municipality. I'm being asked to make a decision on asking staff to do additional work, not knowing what the scope of their review is going to be, not knowing if our staff or their consultants have the capacity to do that work. I know nothing about this direction that was put up on the screen for 5 seconds. So I don't know how I can possibly make an informed decision on yes or no based on this. So I would very respectfully, and I understand the timelines here, but refer this to AFNA and allow staff to have the opportunity to have those discussions, be prepared with those questions at AFNA. But there's no way we as a council can make an informed decision on this today, on a decision of, our DC bylaws of this magnitude. So I will put a referral to AFNA on the floor. Seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Okay, my understanding is that the referral takes precedent in terms of the debate and then the vote. So we have, there is no debate on a referral motion, is my understanding, in fact. The referral motion is in front of us. Is there a debate on the referral motion? That's not my understanding. Deferral is a referral with instructions. The instructions are able to be debated. So the referral is to refer this to AFNA. Are there any instructions that you added, Councillor Danko?
With added instructions that staff review the scope of the additional recommendations and be prepared to answer questions directly at the AFNA meeting as related to the direction.
As outlined in the proposed amendment?
As outlined in the proposed direction, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. So then on the instructions, Councillor Nan and then Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify through clerk. So if the direction is to refer the amendment to AFNA for staff to comment on, it's my understanding the next AFNA meeting is planned to be canceled due to not enough agenda items. And the subsequent AFNA meeting in April is when the DC report is actually on the agenda, correct?
Clerk Pelam?
That's correct.
And so, Mayor, then I'm just confused about the instructions. Are we seeking clarity on the amendment on the same day that we're, as a committee, going to be deliberating on the DC report recommendations?
Councillor Danko?
I would look to staff for some recommendations on the timeline. Perhaps this would be an opportunity to uncancel that AFNA meeting, and then this would be discussed, and then the results of any further investigation or review done by staff could be brought forward to that AFNA meeting, the following one where the report would come forward. Again, this is, a really critical issue that I think deserves
scrutiny.
Agreed, and that's why I want
Thanks,
clarity on the
Thanks, Councillor
instructions.
Danko. Is that clear for you then, Councillor Nan?
No, I would like to hear from staff about the possibility of clarity on the question.
It seems to me, I'm seeing from the chair and vice chair, the mover and seconder, that having a AFNA meeting on the date perhaps that was already canceled or on another date to address this in the interim is something that they're amenable to. But on that note, I'll send it over to GM Zagaric.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if this referral were to be approved, I too would ask if we could convene AFNA on April 4th. The motion stems from the February 22nd AFNA discussions. I expect staff would be able to answer any questions or speak to the proposed motion on April 4th. And so again, that would give us the necessary lead time subject to the approval of the referral and clerks being able to reconvene under the procedural bylaw, the April 4th AFNA.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, if I could just seek final clarity then. So thank you for the responses to the clarifying questions so far. Today is March 27th. April 4th is 1 week away. Are we still okay within procedural bylaw to proceed with an AFNA meeting on April 4th? Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Pelam?
Through the mayor, yes, we could do that. I'm just emailing the LC for AFNA and letting her know that her FNA meeting on April 4th is back on, and to publish the agenda, because it has to be published today, with it to be distributed as far as the motion. Okay, so we'll have everything in place today.
Thanks, Clerk Pelam. Appreciate that. Councillor Nan?
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Councillor Clark on the instructions.
Thank you, Mayor. And what I'm struggling with is it's a 1 week delay. Can I ask through you to staff, do they feel confident that Mr. Scanlon and the staff can review the motion and be prepared to address it on April 4th? Because it's a complex document. I know it sounds like, yeah, we can do this, but it is a very complex document, and I just want some comfort for me that we will have a meaningful report on April 4th.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Jim Scarrick, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is more complicated with respect to this DC background study and associated bylaw, principally because of legislative changes and more specifically around Bill 23. So staff will and the consultants will have to build in those factors with respect to statutory exemptions layered on top of discretionary exemptions. So that does complicate the analysis more so than in past years. With respect to April 4th, I feel confident that staff can speak to the motion. I would have to consult with staff and our expert consultants whether they would be ready to speak to the financial impacts of the various motions. I'm not confident that we will have that level of detail on April 4th, and that may be information that has to come back to a subsequent AFNA and potentially to a special AFNA if that were to be required. But again, with respect to the motion, I'm confident that staff can speak to the intent and spirit of the motion and as it relates to the bylaw, but with respect to all of the financial impacts, that does take some modeling and effort.
Okay, thanks, GM Zagarek. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, those are my
concerns.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Clerk Pilon, did you want to add something about the detail here?
Yes, just for clarification, we would be referring the whole item 3 and the amendment back to AFNA on April 4th, correct?
That's right. Thank you. Sorry about that. Councillor Kretschko, please go ahead.
Not to make this more fun, but I really think we ought not to be trying to schedule an AFNA meeting here today. We canceled it. A bunch of us put different things in there. Like, let's figure out when we can meet as soon as we have to, given what GM Zagarek has said, if you arrange a special meeting, whatever it might be. But I don't think this is the time to be canceling and uncanceling an AFNA meetings without having looked at everyone's schedules. All we do here when we have meeting changes is we consult the people who are actually on the committee, and we ask them when they are available. So if we could just do that as a practice, that'd be great. And if we're all suddenly available now on April 4th, great. But I just don't think that's the job we should be doing here today. So I think that should be out of the recommendation. It should be the next AFNA meeting, and we'll figure out when we can have it.
Thanks, Councillor Kretsch. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
If my question is in order, Mayor Horvath, in terms of on the instructions, if I could ask through you to Mr. Zagarek, in terms of the kind of analysis, will it be fulsome in that my understanding is when the Development Charges Subcommittee was doing its deliberations, yes, they were mindful of the financial impact of a decision, but there were a number of other principles that were set out to guide the deliberations. I'm just looking on the instructions for some assurance that the analysis will also be an assessment in terms of whether, in fact, the suggested direction is in keeping with the direction as a whole in which the Development Charges Subcommittee set out to have for public consult. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. I see Jim Zagarek nodding his head.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I apologize if I was too short in terms of the response. That would be the intent, is to assess the various options across a number of parameters, not just the financial impacts.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I don't see any further speakers, so we have a motion to refer with instructions. I think the instructions are fairly clear. And so I don't know whether that is something that can be put up on the screen, Clerk Pilon, if it's desired. But I believe everybody understands where we're at. Okay. Be referred to April 4th, 2024 Audit, Finance and Administration Committee as follows. And then that's the amendment that was put by Councillors Wang and Spadafora. Okay, so that's what's before us, the referral motion. So can we please go to the vote? Oh, Councillor Kretsch on the...
Yeah, so I saw Councillor Danko nodding, but I didn't really actually say the final part of my sentence, which is, would you be fine to amend this to just say a special meeting of AFNA or the next AFNA meeting, so we can actually schedule that amongst the members of AFNA? That's all I'm asking about. Just trying to prescribe the date today. Seems like there's
problematic
work to do. We canceled the meeting, now we're re-uncanceling meetings. It doesn't seem like the way to do anything. So
I appreciate that, Councillor Kretsch, but we do have a mover of the referral motion, and that would be up to that mover to determine whether it stands as is or whether an amendment that you're suggesting is friendly.
I don't sit on AFNA, so I actually have no idea what's in my schedule, but I would prefer to leave it as April 4th, as that was the meeting that was scheduled. That would be the block that is available with staff. And if it doesn't reach quorum, then it will default to the next available meeting or a special AFNA meeting.
Thanks very much. I mean, if I may, the only thing that I would suggest is, in addition to the April 4th, we could add or a special meeting of AFNA, and that way we have both options that have been approved. So starting with the April 4th, I think, is the understanding, and then or a special meeting to be called for that purpose. Is that all right with you, Councillor Danko? Is that okay with folks? Does that sound amenable? Okay, all right, so we know what's in front of us. We have the referral motion with instructions that have had a friendly amendment, and we'll now go to the vote. That carries 16-0. Nice work, folks. Thanks very much. So then we're on to the balance of the report, I believe. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Alex Wilson, please, and then Councillor Maureen Wilson has also identified. Councillor Alex Wilson, please go ahead.
My apologies, Mayor. I think I'm hanging from before we were amending. I'm all good at this point.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mayor Horwath. Mine is an amendment to item 4. Or no, it's an motion. It's a separate motion, correct? Oh, no. Amendment to item 4, AF&A report 21-022, respecting investing in city roads and sidewalks. It's later.
Pilon?
Okay. My apologies. Thank you for the direction.
That's on a different report? Oh, it's a motion under motions. Okay, no problem at all, no problem whatsoever. So I don't see then anything else on this AF&A report that was moved by Councillor Wang and seconded by Councillor Spatafora, I believe. So then we'll go to the vote, please. I'm a thumbs up. And that carries 16-0. Thanks very much. We're now on to 6.4, City of Hamilton Integrity Commissioner's Report. That is before us. May I have a motion, please, to put that report on the floor? I believe it's moved by, we don't have a mover. So moved by, receive. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Spatafora. That's before us to receive. I think we need to have a recorded vote. Obviously, there's no discussion. Is there any discussion on this for folks? I don't see any discussion. Okay, and we do have, I believe, Councillor Pauls, is this your abstention? Yes. Okay, so with no speakers list in front of us, Clerk Pilon? Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, this is a different one. I apologize for that. Okay, so we still have a mover, Councillor Clark, and a seconded by Councillor Spatafora. Can we go to the vote, please? Thank you. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much. We are now on to item 6.5, which is the Planning Committee Report 24-003, February 23rd, 2024. Councillor Cassar, may I please have a motion to receive and approve the recommendations within the Planning Committee Report?
Yes, you may, Mayor. It's moved by me, seconded by Vice Chair Councillor Maureen Wilson, that Planning Committee Report 24-003, being the meeting held on Friday, February 23rd, 2024, be received and recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thanks very much. See a speakers list on this one. Councillor Jackson, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mayor Horwath. I'm not on Planning Committee. I couldn't attend that meeting, so forgive me to colleagues that did a lot of work on this report and this item. So just through you, Mayor Horwath, to our Acting General Manager, Robichaud. So this is about, right now, provincial legislation. I've tried to do some homework on this, Acting General Manager Robichaud, in advance. Current provincial legislation has municipalities that allow for and go to duplexes and triplexes. Through you, Mayor Horwath, I just got a series of questions. Through you, please.
Okay. Acting General Manager?
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor, that is correct. The province has amended the Planning Act to require that municipalities have policies in their official plans and implementing zoning bylaws to allow up to 3 units as of right in any single semi or street townhouse dwelling across Ontario that's on municipal services.
Thank you, Acting General Manager. Supplementary then, this report before us then is for our municipality to allow for fourplexes. Through you, Mayor Horvath, please, to the same Acting GM.
Certainly. GM Robichaud?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that is correct. So last year, council allowed for the conversion of an existing dwelling to contain up to 4 units. This broadens the permissions on a citywide basis, so whether it's in Stony Creek, Ancaster, Glanbrook, or Dundas, or any of the other communities, to allow a purpose-built fourplex unit subject to the appropriate zoning regulations.
So thank you, Acting GM. And so my third supplementary, I think you covered it. Whereas before there were some exemptions across our city, primarily in, I would imagine, in some of the former suburbs that were exempt from this. This is now entirely citywide inclusive, if passed today. Through Mayor Horvath.
Thanks, Councillor Jackson. GM Robichaud?
Through Madam Chair, or Madam Mayor, that is correct. In particular, the parts of Ancaster were previously not granted the fourplex zoning permissions because of the need to complete that Ancaster drainage study. On the basis of that drainage study being completed and brought forward, staff have now updated and harmonized the regulations so any of the urban areas of the city of Hamilton will all have essentially similar zoning permissions from a use perspective. We are proposing regulations the zoning regulations that reflect a small lot development or a traditional lot development, but the use of the property and those planning permissions will essentially be the same across the entire urban area of the city of Hamilton.
Thank you, Acting GM. Mayor Horvath, it's all part of providing more housing. If you'd allow me a bit of latitude, I'll look to you, through you to the same Acting
You're at 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, but I meant in terms of the segue of the topic.
Oh,
That's
okay.
still
Well,
part
I'll
of
let me
this.
listen and I'll tell you if you're out of order.
I know how you turned your left ear closer to me. Okay. Anyways, through you, Mayor Horvath. Acting General Manager, I was strongly opposed last term to detached secondary dwelling units. I believe now you refer to them as ADUs instead of SDUs, additional dwelling units, detached. It's not here before us today, but I think it's referenced, and I'm wondering, is there a future report coming from maybe community feedback you've received overall? And I'll explain to my colleagues why I'm asking this question. Through you, Mayor Horvath,
Thanks, Councillor
please.
Jackson.
Acting Chair. Madam Mayor, I'm going to defer to Shannon Mackay, who's the manager of zoning reform, and her team to talk about what work has been done to date, what we are seeing, and possible options as we move forward. Thank you.
Perfect. Manager Mackay, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor. As you indicate, we have transitioned to the language of additional dwelling units. And while not the emphasis of this report, there are some modifications, technical modifications to that section. We have, through the approval of that initial permission over our time period, been monitoring additional dwelling units, both internally and detached, through building permit process as well as committee of adjustment. It was initiated through that report that we would continually monitor it and bring forward any updates to the regulations in order to maintain that modern approach and address any interpretation or implementation issues going forward through the future processes of the zoning bylaw reform. We will be taking a look at the general provisions section in its entirety, and at that time, where warranted, we can implement any changes to the additional dwelling unit regulations to make sure it's up to date and to reflect the findings we've seen through the monitoring of those regulations.
That's very encouraging, Manager Mackay. I'm so glad that's on your radar for a full review. And I know I've brought a lot of community feedback to you. And so, Mayor Horvath, when Councillor Danko last year was chair of planning, he was gracious enough to meet with me and communicate with one of my constituents. If I can just give you quickly where I was going with that question and the future report was that, and I voted against it last term, allowing detached secondary dwelling units on the same principal property. What's happened in 2 or 3 occasions in my ward, I'm sure I'm not alone, is that because of what was approved, that literally
the same scope and size and height of a secondary detached dwelling unit on some locations on the East Mountain has been built on the same property behind the principal residence. So you literally, Mayor Horvath, have two same-size principal residence on the same 40-foot lot by 90-foot depth. And it has caused quite a bit of backlash. And so that's where I was going with my question, because the gross floor area of the detached secondary dwelling unit, that typically the owner and or developer, if it's rental, they're using the gross floor area on the main level for parking, and hence it allows for the additional second and third floor. Can I just get the planning department to confirm what I, as a layman, have enunciated, so my colleagues are on solid ground, because I brought it forward as a layman, but if planning staff would just confirm or add additional information. Mayor Horvath, please.
Manager Mackay, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor. What you're speaking to, Councillor, is the definition of gross floor area for the purposes of an additional dwelling unit, which provides an exemption for the parking area. There was an additional requirement added through Planning Committee. I think Councillor Danko brought it forward to implement some measures to make sure that the additional dwelling unit detached was smaller than the primary residence. However, it did exempt parking areas in detached additional dwelling units associated with the overall development.
Thank you, Manager Mackay. And I know, and I'm not speaking for the former chair at all, but again, the conversations I had last year and the picture I sent to Councillor Danko, and I think he was as shocked as I was in terms of what the well-intentioned amendment of the bylaw has unfortunately done in some circumstances. So then overall, Mayor Horvath, look, I'm not thrilled about going to the fourplexes. I get the housing need in our community overall. I definitely was against detached secondary dwelling units, and I'm looking forward to a future report being brought forward to refine and revise that. I guess, Mayor Horvath, I just want to say, and I realize that I may be somewhat anachronistic in my opinion, but I just feel that modest single-family neighborhoods at times just seem to be under assault in terms of what their original intention was to be, and conversions of existing single-family homes to 2 or 3 unit dwellings, fair enough. But now when we're getting into garage conversions, shed conversions, now fourplexes on that same property, and I know society evolves, I understand that, but I can tell you the overwhelming sentiment I've received from my community is grave concern of how the character of modest single-family neighborhoods has been altered, and that's my real concern going forward. Thank you, Mayor Horvath, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I did give you quite a bit of leeway there, so I'm going to go to Councillor Danko and then Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple comments on the approval, I hope, of this policy change for the City of Hamilton. Just reflecting on my own family situation, my daughter is going to college next year. And looking ahead in the next few years, it's starting to become top of mind. Where are young people going to live? What opportunities are they going to have in the City of Hamilton? Where are the opportunities for them when they are making that choice of where they're going to live, where they're going to raise their own families? And then my parents as well, aging and looking to downsize. And what opportunities are there for seniors to find accommodation, to find housing that is in their community, where all their friends and connections are, that is affordable, that they can actually move out of that, 2,000, 2,500 square foot house that with 2 people living there, in order to make that opportunity for someone else to cycle through the housing stock. So I think this is a critical initiative for the City of Hamilton. Really appreciative of staff for all the work that's gone into this. I think it's interestingly very timely that this happens to come up now, considering the Premier's ongoing spat with Bonnie Crombie over what is a fourplex and what that actually means. I just happened to be at the Central Ontario Housing Summit earlier this week that was hosted by the West End Home Builders and the Ontario Home Builders Association, where there is a mix of builders, developers, industry professionals, political leaders from all jurisdictions across every party. And this issue was something that was raised in the panel discussions several times. Really a desire for province-wide standards and how that would simplify the planning process and expectations province-wide. But in lieu of that, the City of Hamilton, along with some other municipalities, but in particular the City of Hamilton, being a real province-wide leader on housing. And I think that's really important for us to recognize that the work that our staff is doing is leading edge on housing. And I think they don't always get that credit or acknowledgement of the great work that they are doing in order to make sure that those next generations, those seniors, do have opportunities. And, it takes time. These changes don't happen overnight. We're putting in this policy today, but it does create those future opportunities. And I think it's really, important to recognize the work that we in the City of Hamilton are doing, doing our part. And I just have one question, because it is something that's come up several times, and I'm sure it will continue to come up, is in the design guidelines for this policy. There are examples of what it is that we mean by that small density infill, residential infill. So I just want to ask one follow-up question to staff, that if they could articulate in the design guidelines when we're saying a fourplex, or what this policy enables, to give a picture of what that actually looks like.
Thanks, Andrew McKay, or I'm not sure who would be.
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor. So if I'm understanding correctly, providing visuals for the public of what a fourplex could look like in their community and neighborhood. Yeah, we've intended through the guidelines to be very visual heavy, so that there are variations and different examples shown of what that could look like along a street, and different designs have been used to illustrate that, and those have been shown individually and along streetscapes that sort of represent what a typical street might look like in a Hamilton neighborhood.
Thanks very much, GM Robichaud. Please go ahead.
From a zoning bylaw standards, the shell, whether it's a single, a semi, a triplex, or a fourplex, will be the same. So unless you're counting hydrometers or mailboxes or looking at addresses, when you walk down the street, if done right, you will not be able to differentiate between a traditional single detached dwelling, a single detached dwelling with a basement apartment, or a new fourplex, purpose-built fourplex. And that's what the zoning regulations say. So we've relaxed the use provisions, but the performance standards essentially stay the same, save and except you may see, I think with the fourplex, that's where it triggers an additional parking space compared to a converted single detached dwelling. So that was part of the reason why we did the initial zoning changes, to say you could convert an existing dwelling. And then we were hearing, well, what if I can convert a dwelling, why can't I just build a 2,000 square foot single, but it's really containing 4 units? So that's what we are trying to achieve, and the design guidelines provide for that opportunity. The federal government also is doing similar sort of design guidelines in terms of pre-approved plans, and that was one of the conversations we've been having with them, is as long as it, from a urban design streetscape perspective, if you can't tell what's happening inside the building, what difference does it make whether it's a traditional single-family home, a multi-generational household, or a purpose-built rental 4-unit dwelling, to create those additional housing opportunities within our existing communities, and thereby reinforcing and supporting stores, churches, schools, et cetera, everything we were trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danko?
Thank you. I appreciate that, painting that picture that what it will look like, from the sidewalk, that it looks like just like every other house in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Danko. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I ask, could a property owner as of right build an additional unit that's standalone in their backyard that is a fourplex?
Jim Robichaud, or, go ahead.
Assuming they have a large enough lot.
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor, a detached unit, it can only be one unit, so the maximum that's permitted on a low-density residentially zoned property is 4 dwelling units on a lot. So that can be through a fourplex. If there's a detached additional dwelling unit, then it would be a triplex with a detached additional dwelling unit to reach that 4, but that's the maximum permission.
Thank you for that, and that was very helpful. The next question, if I may, is on the parking side. So I understand that we're in essence limiting parking on the property. The challenge that I'm experiencing is that the people who are coming and renting are not leaving their car elsewhere, they're bringing their car with them. So how are we handling if you have a fourplex and a 1 in the backyard, you now have 5 cars? How are we dealing with that? Because I have homes in my ward right now, Mayor, with 6 cars, because there's 6 individual families living in the units.
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor, one of the challenges we have is the co-housing arrangement, where it is technically it's a single detached dwelling, but you have 5 or 6 unrelated individuals that are sharing that accommodation, and that's triggering, providing more parking than was originally planned or anticipated. As it relates to new construction, so depending on, we are looking through this, updating the parking standards to different parts of the city, but a fourplex unit would require, sorry, I'm just looking at the staff, additional parking compared to a converted single-family home where you've added a basement apartment. So for a fourplex, it's, depending on the location, in the suburban Heritage Green. Just a moment, sir.
Thank you.
Just having a little bit of research into what the response to the question is, so we'll just give it a minute or so.
Through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. Based on the proposed zoning, it would vary by geographic area. Folks may recall that we recognize that not all areas of the city are different in terms of people's travel behavior and modal splits. So if I'm reading what we provided correctly, a fourplex dwelling unit in kind of the lower city would require no parking spaces, or there would be no minimum parking requirement. In the kind of the next area out, a fourplex would require a total of 3 parking spaces, and in all other areas, 1 per unit.
Councillor Clark?
Okay, so not to be parochial, Stony Creek, Upper Stony Creek. Is that 4 cars? One car per unit in that fourplex on that property?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And the accessory unit in the backyard would not have parking?
Through you, Madam Chairman. To clarify, you're not allowed a fourplex and an accessory unit. You can have a triplex and an accessory unit. So you would not have 5 units on a property. The maximum number of units on a property that would be permitted is 4 units. And each of those units would be required to provide a parking space.
I thank you for that. And I will take the other part of the conversation offline, because I do have homes right now that are sitting there with 6, 7. I had one with 8 cars. It is becoming a challenge. in Upper Stony Creek, and we're having, have you seen that show, Mayor, Parking Wars? We're having it in Upper Stony Creek.
Oh,
So
I have
thank
enough
you.
wars. I don't need more.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Clark.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you very
that.
much, folks.
Yeah, and thanks to the staff for your responses to this particular item. I don't see any further speakers on the speakers list. So before us is the planning report 24003 that was moved by Councillor Kassar and seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. So we'll go to the vote, please. That carries 15-0. Thanks very much. We're now then on to item 6.6, City of Hamilton Integrity Commissioner's Report regarding Council Complaint re-Selection Committee Confidentiality Breach, re-DGB/ICI-2023-02, March 1st, 2024. Can I have the motion to receive the Integrity Commissioner's Report, please? Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Spatafora. Any discussion on this report? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the vote, please. That carries 15-0. Thanks so much. We are now going to have the motion to waive the notice provision. Councillor Kretsch, may I please have the motion to waive the notice provision to consider the General Issues Committee Special Report 24-005. And just a reminder, a 2/3 majority vote is required.
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by future Deputy Mayor Maureen Wilson to do this. Well, I know. Hey, Tom, I'm just getting the enjoyment I can out of this meeting. So, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson, that we waive the rules so we can consider the report from today's GIC meeting.
Okay, can we please have the vote on the waiving of the rules? Oh, we have actual discussion on the waiving of the rules.
Oh.
No, we don't. Let's vote on the waiving, please. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much. We're now then on to the motion on the special report. Councillor Kretsch, may I have please have the motion to receive and approve the recommendations within the General Issues Committee report?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson, that we approve the minutes from this morning's meeting.
Okay, thanks very much. And I have a discussion on the minutes. Councillor Spatafora, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to declare a non-disqualifying interest in item number 5, the Mohawk 4-Ice Center operating agreement. Please, thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't see any further discussion, so we will go to the vote, and Councillor Spatafora will have his opportunity to abstain. That carries 16-0. Thanks very much. So we are now going to rise and report. Councillor Kretsch, may I have the motion to rise from committee of the whole, please?
With my forever seconder, Councillor Maureen Wilson, that we rise from the committee of the whole.
Thank you. That votes up. That carries 16 to 0. Thanks, everyone. We are now on to the motion section of the agenda. The first motion is 7.1, amendment to item 4 of the Audit, Finance and Administration Committee Report 21-022, respecting investing in city roads and sidewalks infrastructure with the Canada Community Building Funds, which was approved by Council on December 15th, 2021. Councillor Maureen Wilson, would you please present your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. This is, I was earlier jumped the gun on this. This is the motion. It is with respect to just consolidating the last bit of funding available to Ward 1 from the Canada Community Building Fund to allow for some investment in sidewalk improvement in Ward 1.
And do you have a seconder?
Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor Spadafora.
Okay, thanks very much. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote, please. That carries 15 to 0. Thanks very much. We're now on to 7.2, amendment to item 1 of the Emergency and Community Services Report 23-011, respecting the annual winter response strategy. Councillor Alex Wilson, could you please present your motion?
Thank you. I also was 90 minutes early on this one. Apologies. This is a housekeeping motion moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Clark. It is to correct the funding source for our winter response, moving it from primarily the tax stabilization reserve to instead putting in new funding sources, with the tax stabilization reserve being the kind of catch-all if the first two don't do it. I'm sure staff would be happy to answer questions. Again, this is housekeeping coming from them, and it's just accurately reflecting where the money for this initiative is actually coming from. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Wilson, and seconded by Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark, did you want to speak to it? Councillor Clark has a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just to our staff, Mayor, I guess the provincial budget was announced yesterday, and my takeaway from it was that there was no new funding announced. I'm assuming that includes no new funding on the homelessness file. Can I get confirmation that that's the case? Do we know that yet?
GM Mater, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor Clark. So far, that's my takeaway. However, the devil is sometimes in the details, so we'll continue to have our fingers crossed, and hopefully there may be something hiding there for us. And if we do hear anything, we'll certainly be reporting back. Thank you.
So I think I'll hold back my commentary in the hopes that the Premier recognizes that we are now spending far more than the $28 million that he gives us for homelessness, to the tune of about 76, 78 million. So I'm hoping that he will recognize that we are doing it because there's an increased demand in our community, quite prevalent by what's going on around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I don't see any further speakers on the list, so we'll go to the vote on that motion. This carries 15 to 0. Thanks, everyone. We're now on to number 7.3, which is City of Hamilton Bird Friendly City. Councillor Kretsch, would you please present your motion?
Happy to, and seconded by Councillor Cassar. I'll just speak to it briefly by saying this is the next phase in us becoming a bird-friendly city, and wanted to let everyone know, in case you missed the news, we were actually just made an intermediate level bird-friendly city because of this motion being put forward on the agenda. That gave our Nature Canada partners enough confidence that council was going to pass it, I guess. So they've kind of moved us to that intermediate level. We want to get to as high as we can, obviously, as being a bird-friendly city. I want to thank city staff, especially those who've been helping to talk about markings for windows, other bird safety measures, and to councillors Alex Wilson and Craig Cassar, who've been working with me on this for a long time, meeting with bird advocates, groups, not only just in Hamilton, but outside of Hamilton, to talk about what we can do as a city to lead on this. There's a lot to be done to make our city safer for birds, and all of us who spend time in the downtown core know that we see from time to time birds who die, who strike buildings. We can prevent that from happening. This is important, especially as we see species in decline. We see certain bird populations that aren't doing as well, and then we find these poor creatures, lying dead, so we can do a lot more to help them. This is the first step on that path, or the second step on that path. So be grateful for your support. Also, just a small plug to say that if you haven't lately whiled away many hours staring at the peregrine falcons on top of the Sheraton, please go to Falcon Watch. Please check them out. There are city birds. They want your love. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cretch. Councillor Kassar, please.
Thanks, Mayor Horvath. Just a brief comment to thank staff for the work to get us to where we are today, ongoing work, and to the community organizations as we continue our journey or migration, if you will, to an even better bird-friendly city. Thank you.
Good fun. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Often we look at birds as ornamental nice-to-haves. And if I could, through you to the mover or the seconder, care to educate us in terms of the ecological significance of sustaining a healthy bird population, please and thanks.
I guess that would, are you asking for Councillor Cretch? Please go ahead.
I think that a lot of ecological impacts happen in Hamilton. We're part of the Atlantic Flyway, for instance, that corridor that allows birds